What is that smell? I am definitely getting a hint of a deal. Oh wait, it's more than a hint. Yeah, these are the best deals, and not just this season, but all year long. In all seriousness, the smartest shoppers know that you get the brands you love with the most savings and cash back with Rakuten. And I know I'm certainly interested in sniffing out those deals. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Urban Outfitters, Petco, even Expedia, and getting cash back doesn't mean you have to miss out on sales because those can be stacked right on top. It's easy to use and based on a simple idea. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cashback through PayPal or check. Smells like a perfect deal to me. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's Rakuten.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Welcome back to Undertow, Realm's podcast dedicated to tales of the weird and the wicked. I'm your host, director and producer, Fred Greenhalgh. We continue today with part 4 of The Collection. Against all advice doled out in every horror movie you've ever seen, Peter acquired a mysterious book and followed it to the north of England and his father's bizarre estate, which is filled with such lovely objects as a suit of armor that will murder anything that makes noise, stuffed lions that will actually eat you, and a jar of honey that will attempt to drown you in its sweetness, quite literally. And don't worry, this House of Horrors is just getting started, as we'll find out today in part 4 of The Collection. As you know, these episodes take a lot to make. They involve finding a writer, they involve booking amazing voice acting talent, they involve building these immersive soundscapes, in addition to the financial resources to get this all done, because this is done on a professional level. It's also very mentally taxing, and keeping at peak mental performance in these stressful times is no easy feat, which is why I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about Magic Mind. When Magic Mind reached out saying they had a product which helps you keep performing your best without invoking jitter craziness, I had to try it out. It is now my second week taking a morning Magic Mind mental performance shot, and I love it. It's a little 2-ounce, as I said, mental performance shot you take on its own. It's quite tasty. You can also pair it with your morning caffeine. For me, I am a death before decaf drinker of strong black coffee, but I am also keenly aware of caffeine's limitations, such as, you get to that point in your day where you're starting to crash, but if you take another cup of coffee, you're going to go into hyperactive squirrel mode. And Magic Mind really helps with this. I call Magic Mind kind of a coffee turbo booster in the best way possible. It doesn't invoke that jitter state. It actually uses an amino acid called L-theanine to help trickle out the coffee's effects throughout the day. Magic Mind also has an insane amount of other good stuff in it, such as mushroom nootropics and adaptogens, and over 100% of your daily dose of vitamin C and D, basically a multivitamin for your brain. Magic Mind offers a no questions asked 100% refund for 100 days after buying, so if you are intrigued with what they might be able to do for you, you can give it a shot. They ship internationally to 65 countries and are 100% carbon neutral to boot. You have a limited offer that you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code Undertow20 at checkout. You can claim it at magicmind.com/Undertow. That's magicmind.com/Undertow, code Undertow20. And now, The Collection, Part 4.
I lay on the floor for a time and caught my breath as I tried to push the memories from the war back into the shadows where they belonged. What had happened in that room couldn't have been my imagination, could it? The honey was so lifelike. I still felt it running down my skin, still taste it where it had touched my lips. Was I starting to crack? I sat up and put my head in my hands. Could this have all been a dream? Could I have still been in those trenches up to my eyes in mud and surrounded by slaughter? No, the house was real. Otherwise, all the happiness with my family, all the strife with my father between the war and now was a delusion. My wife wasn't make-believe. My son wasn't fantasy. The honey room had only reminded me of Passchendaele. I wasn't still there. I wasn't imagining all of this. I couldn't have been. I didn't want to keep going. I'd rather have stayed right there in that hall for the rest of the night, away from any imminent perils. But there were no windows here. I couldn't tell when daybreak came. Even if Aaron was able to call the constabulary and they came here looking for me, they would be at the mercy of the house's other rooms before they could reach me. I didn't want anyone else to suffer from my father's collection, especially if Aaron came with them. God, what if Frances came too? On any ordinary evening, Frances and I would be done with dinner by now. She would probably put Emil to bed and read him a story. I imagined her waiting in the hall for me that night, pacing and fretting. Had she forgiven me for not telling her the truth the other day? I didn't know. Last night was the first time we hadn't slept together in the same bed for over a year, and the time before was only because she had been dreadfully ill with a cold. What if she wasn't worried about me? What if she thought I'd just gone out to clear my head for the night or something? I'd done so a few times before, driving around in the dark, seeking serenity with myself that was sometimes hard to find. Perhaps she had told Aaron about our fight, and now he wasn't coming after all. Except that I knew my wife. Frances was most assuredly worried. Though she often wore a mask of resolve, I knew Frances thought day and night about our son and our house, her parents, our finances, and lately, a lot about me. She had been under so much strain, and I had been a selfish dolt all week, lost in my own worries about my father and the estate, worries that were justified as it turned out, but still. I got to my feet. I couldn't stay cooped up in this hall. I had to make my own way out. I had to get home to her and Emil. I needed to know she was okay. Opening the book, I flipped to the page concerning the infected teeth. According to the dot map, it was at the far back of the house. If my calculations about the sizes of the room were correct, it meant there were at least 2 more rooms that separated me from the front hall where I'd originally entered Caulfield. I spent several moments flipping through the archives, searching for what could possibly be lying in wait ahead of me. There were so many objects in the book, almost too many to count. It dawned on me that there couldn't possibly be one room for each item. It would stand to reason that if my father had some of these objects shipped elsewhere, there were other places with items in them. More than one house like this. The thought chilled me. If the dot map covered more than one building, then it was all but useless to try and find my way through Caulfield with it. I had no idea where I was going. I didn't know how to get out of here. I slammed the book shut and threw it as far as I could down the hall. It tumbled to a stop near a wall, the spine up and pages open. A doorway at the end of the hall beckoned to me. I had to keep going. I had to enter it. Getting to my feet, I stepped cautiously toward the room. It turned a silvery blue the closer I came, as though it contained some kind of an Arctic realm. I gathered the book from the ground and tucked it under my arm as I looked inside. A polished wooden floor stretched ahead of me, smooth as glass and rich brown in colour. Scalloped stellar patterns in the tin ceiling dizzied me the more I looked at them, and inlaid bookshelves filled with black books sat in each corner. Standing in rows on either side of the room were nearly 30 marble sculptures of people, dozens of men and women alike, most of them young, and all with their hands covering their ears. Behind them, and in some of the bookshelves, rested dusty instruments, everything from a harp that stood at practically my height, to drums, a trumpet, cello. I remained outside the room, waiting for one of the statues to move. I was convinced that, like the lions and the paladin, they only gave the impression they weren't harmful. Perhaps music made them come to life. Good thing I was rather tone-deaf and a terrible singer to boot. I stayed put for several minutes to study them. They didn't move 1 inch. While I shared my father's musical incompetence, my mother had been an accomplished pianist. In one of his rarest compliments, my father had said her skill was impeccable and her compositions lovely anomalies. These strange melanges could lift him from the darkest of spirits whenever he heard her play. She'd only done so when I was a young lad. As my father spent less time at home, she withdrew from the piano and spent more time in her room. I could still hear her playing Satie and Chopin, her poise as she sat there, the measured way she touched each key, and the sound of their pristine harmony. I realized the sound wasn't only in my memory. From the other end of the room, the faintest plinks of a piano reached out to me. In the shadows, I saw the outline of its grand frame, but couldn't see who sat behind it. Stepping past the threshold, I let myself be carried by the familiar tune, a part of me somehow bolstered by it. Those notes reminded me of happier times, of a place in my past that was somewhat peaceful. I passed the other marble statues, their faces carved in pain, gazes locked toward the ceiling as if begging for release from some higher constitution. I didn't understand why they were covering their ears. The melody was so delightful. In the center of the room, my vision abruptly clouded over. I put a hand up before me and tried to focus my sight, but it waxed in and out. Balance swaying, I careened into a statue, catching myself on its sturdy arms. My legs were beyond my control, my head like a 12-ton stone sitting precariously on my body. Behind me, the music persisted, chaotic and exquisite. I stumbled back to the center of the room, my hands out at either side as I tried to restore my equilibrium. I plummeted to my knees on the floor, my skull feeling as though it was filling up with cement. The warm trickle of a tear ran down my cheek. As I wiped my eyes with my shirt sleeve, the fabric came away red. A needle of panic pierced me, but quickly faded when I finally saw the piano. Seated at it was a statue of a woman with full cheeks and a demure smile lighting her carved lips. The keys rose and fell on their own away from her hands, neatly folded in her lap. The melody's intensity magnified, the notes clustering together in peculiar yet somehow perfect discord. All I remembered wanting was to become lost in the music, needing to be. The room dropped away from me as I sank into an abyss of painful pleasure. Everything spun, though I remained still, my body light and smoky. Tears coursed down my cheeks. A deeper part of me recognized they were blood-stained, and I was oddly fine with it. I don't know how long I remained locked in that treacly hypnosis. It felt like forever or only a few seconds. A mounting vocal symphony grew from underneath the piano melody, voices that cried out with rhythmic despair. Futility and misery paired together and drained the two wonderful feelings that had blossomed in me because of the piano piece. It was almost as if those voices fought to awaken me. Managing to open my eyes, the first thing that struck me was my inability to move. The second, I was standing among the other statues. When I looked down at myself, I gasped. My legs, my stomach, and my right hand all had solidified into marble. I cried out in horror and struggled against the stone prison that was my body. It was no use. I couldn't make my feet budge. My distress rode the music as if the fear belonged inside of each splendid note. The orchestration desired me to relax and to give up, longed for me to join its gathering of solidified admirers for all eternity. I was tempted, oh so very tempted by the promise of a timeless, delicate embrace. The voices around me rose and fell. I pictured them as steam, the basses foggy and low to the ground, while the sopranos curled into the air higher and higher, clearer and clearer. They called from the statues around me, previous victims of the piano's Black Widow song. They called for me to resist the music's enticement. The rock rippled midway up my torso and stopped short of my heart. My chest tightened with it. I didn't have much time. If I stayed here, I'd never be able to leave, permanently trapped in stone. I had to escape. I fought to focus on a plan, driving my mind to ignore the music. The only way to stop the sounds was to destroy the piano. But how? I was already half frozen in place. I flexed my left hand, my fingers touching my pocket. Something rattled inside. My matches. They were still in there along with my last rolled cigarette. If I could light one and somehow touch it to the piano, I could make the music stop. It was a ludicrous plan, unlikely to work, but it was all I had. Feebly keeping my attention on the task at hand, I willed my hand to reach down into my pocket and grasp the matchbox. Each second felt like agony, my fingers fumbling over it again and again. There! I had it, barely. I tried to concentrate on the statue's voices and ignore the melody. I had to stay in control, just a little longer. A jangle of piano keys squeezed my lungs closed. I gasped, unable to breathe, and in my panic, dropped the matchbook. As the piano's tune intensified, my vision tunneled and my left hand hardened. My heartbeat pounded in my ears and throbbed in my neck, growing slower and slower. Losing the battle for my mind, I surrendered to the music's glorious abstractions. The hammering in my head loudened, practically shaking the room. As everything lost its color, the door behind the piano shot open and banged against the inside wall. A figure stomped inside. Blackness engulfed everything. Piano keys clanged. Wood squealed and splintered, and the music abruptly cut off. The statue's screams rang out even louder. Crunch! Some of them stopped abruptly with the smashing of steel on stone. The cloying spell faded from my thoughts as my vision returned. Air plunged down into my formerly constricted lungs. I collapsed against the floor and coughed violently as my vision returned. The room was in a full state of pandemonium. The piano lay demolished. Ivories, strings, and hammers littered the ground around the pummeled carcass. The stone lady sitting at the bench was also broken, the cleaved bottom half still sitting there reservedly. Above me, the intruder swung a spear around like a crazed destructive force, annihilating every last screaming statue. The paladin. I stifled my wheezing and froze in place. What was it doing here? Why had it saved my life? My confusion promptly lifted as I realized it hadn't, not on purpose. The music had been loud. The paladin must have heard the piano from the dining room across the manor. He heard it. I knew what happened when the paladin heard anything. He attacked the source of the sound. Anything within his earshot was at risk, including other items in the collection. Somehow, though, he hadn't heard me panting for breath amongst the sounds of his devastation and the statue's screams. Functioning on primal impulses, I crawled for the doorway, quivering as pieces of rubble crumbled around me and bounced against my body. I closed my eyes, and visions of war assaulted me. The repetitive punch of machine gun fire echoed in the thick mists of my memory, the acrid taste of gunpowder in the air, that burnt stench ravaging my nose that I couldn't help but breathe in. Go! Further! Move! The thoughts repeated as I pushed myself onward. In the corridor outside the music room, I cautiously got to my feet and snuck to the room at the opposite end. The door there was open and undamaged. I slipped inside and closed it behind me as quietly as I could. I leaned there for the longest time, trembling, out of breath, and my eyes closed while I battled the memories of what I'd undergone and overcome. Every time I drew a breath, my lungs and throat seared with pain. "You're not at war anymore," Francis's voice whispered against the jagged recollections. "You're safe." I focused on her face, on her sweet smile, and gradually Passchendaele faded. It wasn't gone, only paled like a stain upon me that I could never wash away. I needed to keep it together, if only for a little longer. I wasn't safe until I was outside of these horrid walls. One relief shoved to the front of my mind as I took a deep breath and exhaled. The piano was destroyed. No one could be lured by that siren song again, all thanks to that demonic paladin. Why hadn't he fallen under the piano spell like I had? I decided I didn't care and wouldn't question any further than that. His immunity to it had saved me from being trapped there forever. I am alive, I reminded myself. I am almost out of here, almost home to Francis and Emil. I turned around. Before me was a narrow hall lined with mirrors.
Hey Undertow listeners, Fred here, sharing some love for Quince. I don't think of myself as a fashionista, but it turns out actually I'm really particular about what styles work for me, and I'm also really keen to support brands that are safe and ethical, which Quince delivers in spades. What's more, by partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out that middleman and passes the savings on to us. I've gone ahead and grabbed some versatile pieces to upgrade my style, such as a jet black full-zippered hoodie sweater made of Mongolian cashmere. It gives me the looks of a Jedi, while also making me feel like I'm wrapped in a warm hug every time I put it on, which is pretty wonderful. I also love their activewear. I got one of their performance t-shirts, which crazily enough is super comfortable as an underlayer here in New England in cold weather, but I also brought it on my vacation to the tropics of Belize, where it was reliably 85 degrees or more every day, and it was light, breathable, stylish, just incredibly versatile, and great piece of clothing. With spring on the way, I am looking to continue to freshen up my wardrobe with killer luxury essentials from Quince, and you can too. Indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/undertow for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/undertow to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/undertow.
When life gets hectic, one of the first things that goes out the window for me is making sure I'm eating well. Deciding what to make for dinner night after night, especially on those busy weekdays, can just take a little bit out of me. I actually had a day like that recently where I was planning on just ordering takeout because I had decision fatigue on top of regular fatigue, and I'm so glad I didn't because it ended up being the same day that my HelloFresh box arrived. I usually get HelloFresh's 15-minute meals because I love how quickly the meals come together, and I made this sausage and tortellini soup with garlic bread. It was so filling and just perfect for a cozy winter eve. And now I have a recipe for a simple and delicious meal that I know I can make quickly and in one pot, and I love being able to reuse these recipes that I get from HelloFresh. They also have new ready-made meals, so you can go from the fridge to your fork in just 3 minutes. It's the same high-quality ingredients and restaurant-quality flavor you expect from HelloFresh, just with none of the work. So I'm stoked to try those out on the days when I want to do even less in the kitchen.
Get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at hellofresh.com/HelloFreshPodcast. 1 item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to hellofresh.com/HelloFreshPodcast.
When I was younger, I would help my little sister do her makeup for dance competitions. And while I enjoyed spending that time with her, learning about the different techniques needed to achieve the look, there were pretty strict guidelines for the stage makeup, and not much room for self-expression. I was reminded of those moments recently when I was helping one of my best friends get ready for a party. As a trans woman who came out later in life, she didn't grow up playing with makeup like I had, and we had so much fun picking just the right purples and eye glitter to match her outfit for the evening. What made us both feel beautiful that night wasn't just about the makeup, but how we were committing to showing up as ourselves and encouraging each other to do the same. That's the commitment that Thrive Cosmetics also knows well, with over 10 years of celebrating the strength and beauty of women. And they don't just talk the talk. For every product purchased, Thrive Cosmetics donates products and funds to support important causes, including domestic abuse survivors, veterans, homelessness, and LGBTQ+ communities. I feel proud getting my favorite makeup products from them, knowing that it also positively impacts people and communities I care about. And they really do carry my favorite makeup products. One that I can't get enough of is the Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. It's the best mascara I've ever used. It doesn't clump or smudge, and my eyelashes always look dramatically longer thanks to their flake-free tubing formula. Plus, like all of Thrive Cosmetics beauty products, it's certified 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients. So whether it's for yourself, a sister, a friend, celebrate the women in your life with Thrive Cosmetics, luxury beauty that gives back. Right now, you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order at thrivecosmetics.com/thrive. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/thrive for 20% off your first order.
It was from the first page of the book. I glanced down at my hands, preparing to open it up, but they were empty. I gasped. I'd left the book behind in the music room. Cautiously, I put my ear to the door and listened. All had gone silent in the music room. There were no more screams and no more sounds of destruction. I couldn't go back. I couldn't risk the paladin coming to life again. But somehow, he'd got through this room without dying. So could I. What had the page said? I racked my brain. Something about fear. Yes, that was it. Control your fear. I hated the sentence the moment it sprang to my mind. I didn't want to think what would happen if I couldn't harness my fright. I'd barely survived the last room, and all I could think of was how I could have died there, how I should have died there. Luck had been my only savior. I doubted I'd have it twice in a row. You're nearly there, I thought, and forced myself to take deep breaths. You are not afraid. I walked toward the door at the other end of the room. You are nearly there, and you are not afraid. I pushed the mantra through the torrent of negativity. Every dreading cell clashed against my delicate belief that I would be all right. As long as I didn't look into those mirrors with fear in my mind, I would be safe. I tried to think of the sunlight's warm breath on my skin. I thought about riding through the countryside next to my mother in the car, the softness of her periwinkle blue dress beside me, and the shimmers of silver in her hair. We saw vast golden countryside and towns flourishing behind stone fortresses. That 1 week of delight before she died. A chance for my imagination to flourish outside of university. A chance for her to feel free, neither of us smothered in that gloomy estate and by a man who rarely indulged us. Open your eyes, Peter. My mouth fell open at the voice. But when I opened my eyes, there was no one in the room with me. Spinning, I saw myself in the mirror and froze. Standing behind me in my reflection was my father. His face was carved with that blend of contempt and disappointment, his skin more craggy than I remembered, and his eyes hollower. Was this how he'd looked before he had died? I'd wondered for a time how he'd appear, even imagined what it would be like to see him one last time. He was almost exactly how I'd pictured him. Father? I could barely move my mouth to speak. He set his hand on my shoulder. I started in place, shuddering at the pressure of his hand on me, a hand that was nowhere to be seen outside of the reflection. I am so glad you are alive, he said. It will be a pleasure to watch him kill you. I spun around. He wasn't there. But the paladin was. I lurched back and tripped over my own feet as my heart soared into my throat. How? It was impossible. The door to the music room was still closed. He couldn't be here. The paladin brandished the mighty spear over his head. I backed away, but kept an eye on where I moved, willing myself to walk slowly and calmly. All would be fine as long as I didn't make any noise. But he kept coming, just as slow and just as calm. His bones clicked with each movement, emaciated jaw somehow shaped into a grisly smile. My composure evaporated. I'm not making any sounds. How does he know where I am? How is he still moving? I glanced over my shoulder for only a moment, noticing I was close to hitting a wall. The paladin thrust the spear forward. I leaned back to avoid it, teetering on my heels. The spear shaft swung back and slammed into my chest. The breath I'd fought so hard to regain in the music room was once more knocked out of me. I crashed down onto my back and gnashed my teeth. I heaved for air, my ribs throbbing. This is all wrong, I remembered thinking. Why does he have so much power over me? As the paladin towered over me and raised his spear, terror doused any lasting hope, a horror I only experienced on the front lines of war, and one that was rooted in nightmares I'd suffered as a child. Visions rushed over me, lying helpless in the grass as a boy, watching the amber eyes of the lions come for me in the violet dark. A thunderous roar echoed through the mirror room before a gargantuan creature leapt over me. Tackling the paladin, they crashed to the floor opposite me. I rolled as far away from them as was possible, and my breath returned to me at long last. The lion crouched over the paladin was even larger than the one I'd seen in the greenhouse. Nose crunched in an ugly snarl, white fangs like blades, and an enormous mane. The beast easily dwarfed the paladin who struggled underneath. The spear was tucked under the claws of the lion's massive paw. Another roar nearly caved in my ears. I lay there, petrified, having forgotten how to stand. I couldn't focus, drowned in thoughts of my eventual and horrific demise, slaughtered by teeth and claws. It's not real. The thought punctured through my panic. They're not really here. As the lion ripped into the paladin's head, I remembered the real paladin was still in the music room, and the door between the two rooms was still closed. This lion wasn't the same one from the greenhouse at the back of the property. It looked over at me, blood-soaked maw dripping and piercing yellow eyes cutting through me. This was all my imagination. None of it was real. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to clear my mind by thinking of the only thing that would help me: the book. My priceless and necessary ticket out from this place. I'd left it behind, but the mirror could bring it back into existence if I was afraid of it. And afraid of it I most certainly was. That book had pages upon pages of deadly objects and creatures, its full spectrum largely unexplored. What other monstrous things were depicted within its yellowed pages? I imagined the cracked leather spine and the weight of it in my hands, the sound of the pages flipping open and the cover snapping closed. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty once more. Rasping, I spun around, searching for any signs of carnage. The floor wasn't blood-stained. The paladin was no longer broken and flailing on the floor. The gargantuan lion was gone. Only the immaculate mirrors remained. The low light from above gleamed on their golden frames. My father's book lay at my feet, pristine, as though it hadn't undergone any of the torture that I had. I picked it up in my shaky hands and carefully tucked it under my arm. Clapping echoed around the space. I stared into the mirror, recognizing the face of my father again, sitting at his desk in his university office behind me.
"Well done, Peter,"
he said, picking up a glass of brandy and downing it. All that he'd put me through, all of this unnecessary torment, all of the agony, reliving my awful childhood all so I could remember how unavailable, inattentive, and guarded he'd been. He'd made me suffer through my recollections of the war by going through this place and nearly dying one too many times as I did so. My hands balled into fists.
"Well done what?" I spat. "I never imagined you as a survivor,"
he said through a cough, and poured himself another drink from a glass decanter nearby.
"In fact, I never thought you more than an immature dissident."
"And I never considered you'd been mad enough to collect so many horrible things together in one place. We apparently don't know each other at all." My father clunked the decanter down on the desk and stood.
"You were warned not to come here. Inga told you to stay away, but you still came. You brought this on yourself, Peter."
I thought of Rap on the street that night, her insistence that I not enter the house. How could I not? How could I stay away when she hadn't bothered to explain any of it? My father could have expounded upon his collection in a letter, or could have left it in more capable hands than raps. I wanted to hit him as hard as I could, and the tiny flame of anger deep inside me surged with that desire. I came because you kept secrets, like always. This time, it's my responsibility to handle them because you're not here to.
Hypocrite, he snarled. How? You never cared about my research.
He slammed his glass against the door. I shuddered at the ear-splitting sound, shards sprinkling at my shoes.
Not before I was obliged to. And your blundering excursion through Caulfield is enough evidence for you to conclude my collection needs dealing with, he chuckled. If you'd actually taken the time to read the pages in that book, all of this wouldn't have been such a punishment for you.
I held the book up to the mirror. How was I to know these words weren't just madness? I believed you had completely lost your mind, and I wasn't the only one. His eyes lost some of their mirth.
As a child, you believed your flights of fancy were real until you told me I shouldn't think that way.
Now, I turned on my heel to face him, my words rising like the flame on a torch. In my amazement, the room around me had changed completely from the Hall of Mirrors to Father's university office. A lone mirror was still behind me, my only distraction from the mirage around me. There my father was, real as ever, watching me with dissecting eyes. I could even smell the sourness of his whiskey-tainted breath from where I stood on the other side of the desk.
When I left for Central America all those years ago, my father said, pushing a hand through his thin grey hair, never did I dream I would find anything that portended mystic qualities. Never did I imagine there were objects in the world that couldn't be clarified by science, that couldn't be explained without applied principles. I feared I could never truly appreciate the supernatural with my years of rational scholarship and rigid conviction. You were a constant reminder of that blissful ignorance I was missing. How envious I was of you.
Envious of me? I could barely squeak out the words.
Your ignorance and naivety. You believed in things that couldn't be seen. I longed for that connection with my effects.
He waved his arm at the room.
So much that I bound most of my years to studying them. My work became my life, my purpose to fulfill before my days were over.
He looked at me, and I saw something akin to humor in his eyes.
When you were older, I thought for a short time I might even be able to show you. Perhaps this magic might have been a bridge for us to reconnect on. But I gave up on that notion after you went and married that silly girl.
I started from my place, but held myself, only just barely. Francis is my partner, my equal, and my closest friend. After the war, I needed someone I could confide in and confess my spirits to. I wanted the bond that you and Mother once had before you destroyed it. The wounded look in his eyes was one I'd never seen before, and the ire that sprang up after was quick and threatening. I thought he might strike me then. Instead, he turned his back on me and walked to his books to trail his fingers along the rows of spines.
You're right, and you're wrong, he said. Mostly right. She was such a delicate creature, your mother. Grace didn't belong with somebody as severe as me, but she made up her mind that she might be able to change the man I was. She couldn't, though. Not enough. So she settled for trying to make you into a better one. I stiffened. She did that and much more in your absence. He scoffed but didn't say anything. My wife is just as kind and devoted as Mother was, but Frances also has something that Mother never had, the strength to make decisions for her own benefit, regardless of any man's arrogance or self-interest. It's the reason I fell in love with her from the start. You're only with her because you worry that someday you'll end up like me. You keep her and the boy around in order to lie to yourself about the kind of man you really are. The sharp spur of his comment dug in. Such was the anger that coursed through me that I felt I could set everything alight with my eyes if I wanted. It's true, it may be too late to change who I become, but I want to think that someday, if I find myself following your path unconsciously, Francis will have an escape.
If I become obsessed to the point of madness, she won't be stuck with me like Mother was with you, like being tied to a rock in a roaring river."
You don't believe that for a second,
my father jeered, walking back to the desk.
All she's done is worried about you ever since you tied the knot.
I nodded. She worries for me, but her endurance is marvelous, and I have faith she can hold her own should any horrible self-importance strike me down. She can cut herself free if need be, and take our son somewhere safe. He met my gaze.
You and your mother were never forced to stay. I told Grace more than enough times she could leave if she wished, and she should have. But she was set in her ways, and she didn't want you to grow up without me.
I did grow up without you.
That's what makes it all the worse. You'll never know the wound of shame until you've lost the love and respect of those closest to you.
Oh, come off it. You outright ignored us, and it never bothered you, did it? I said through clenched teeth. My father reared his head.
You seem to think I'm nothing more than one of those statues in the music room. Do you think I'm incapable of self-guilt? A man, especially a father, cannot ignore the injustices he's caused his own family. I felt every pain I caused you too. I built them up like a toxin in my body. I never let it show, because what was the point? Nothing useful ever came from spilt tears, nothing except a desire to avoid the mistakes that brought you them. The only way I could keep those ignominies at bay was to avoid you more.
While he spoke, he clutched at his chest as though his heart would leap out at any moment. All of the air left me. For a moment, I thought I'd been turned to stone again.
You are a callous bastard, I whispered. That's not a new discovery for you, Peter. If it were, you wouldn't be having this conversation with my phantasm.
I opened my mouth to retort when the words sunk in. It was all an illusion. The walls about me had a dreamlike quality to them as the books appeared to glow and the world outside the windows was too dark to see properly. The colors around his office seemed too bright and his words were too truthful. My real father would never have revealed anything from beneath his icy exterior. He was dead, and this wasn't his ghost I was speaking to. It was an echo of how I remembered him, fused with a yearning for closure I'd never experienced. My mind had supplied my father's voice with admissions I'd wanted to hear. I cleared my throat. You know there are those who want your collection. My father nodded. People who are willing to kill to get it.
Yes.
Do you know what they will do with these things if they find them?
Yes.
What? My father's gaze lingered on the book in my hands.
Exactly what you think they'll do.
I swallowed the lump in my throat. It was as much a confirmation as I needed, even if it was only a deeper part of me acknowledging it. Then you know what I have to do. Again, he nodded. I turned my back on him, my chest aching, although I wished it wouldn't. Nothing had changed between us, but I felt different all the same. Goodbye, Father.
Peter.
His voice was so brittle, and though the last thing I wanted was to turn back around, to have to look into his eyes once more, I found myself staring at his reflection in the mirror before me one last time. In a mere blink, my father was abruptly engulfed in fire. His university office burned in the mirror's reflection, doors and windows wreathed by flames, glass melting, and books lit like torches. My father stood in the middle of the immolation as though it were a pacifying experience somehow. The temperature suddenly spiked, and I whirled around to find the entire hall of mirrors ablaze. I had made the inferno real, and now Caulfield House was aflame. Fumes filled my lungs as I sprinted for the door. Shelves tumbled down behind me, and books spilled across the floor like fiery serpents. I wrenched the doorknob to the side and fell headlong into the next room, fully expecting to tumble into another trap, another object's terrible deception. But it was the main hall, the glorious empty main hall that I'd entered hours ago. Black smoke trailed through the opening, while fire licked at the warring parties on the murals overhead. The front door was heavy to open, my lungs racked by the fumes, and my body feverish from the rising heat. Early morning light spilled across me as I scrambled out. I flung myself down upon the earth outside, coughing and struggling to get further away. The heat intensified, as did the gradual roar of the flames as they ate Caulfield's frame, consumed its bricks, and bubbled the glass in its windows. I climbed to my feet and stumbled across the lawn. Once I met the grass at the metal gate, I fell to my knees. Everything I'd experienced collapsed down upon me then. The reality of what I'd witnessed, realizations of what my father had set in motion, the tortures I had barely escaped from. Worst of all was that I could still hear him, his voice resonating in my mind, the things he'd said playing like a static-laced recording. When I closed my eyes, I could still see him burning and hear his screams. I lost all control and cried out. All of the rage and disgrace and pain that had brewed inside of me upon seeing my father released to the air like the steam from a kettle. I bent my head toward the ground, fingers clawing at the rich soil, my cries as feral and rending as a wounded animal's. The gunning of engines drew closer over the hills, interspersed with the rapid beeps of a klaxon. Soon it will all be over, a tiny voice inside me said. What I imagined was the last vestigial shred of hope. It was lying.
And that was The Collection, Part 4. Peter has managed to escape the estate and burn the damn accursed place to the ground. But does that mean his horrors are over? Oh no, dear listeners, we have a whole other chapter for you coming up next week, Part 5. Find out what could be worse than being stuck in a house that's trying to kill you, only here on Undertow. The Collection was written by Katherine Silva, performed by Cliff Chapman, with editing and sound design by Rory O'Shea. Produced by yours truly, Fred Greenhalgh, as a Dagaz media production for Realm. Undertow is a production of Realm, hosted by Fred Greenhalgh, associate produced by Devin Shepherd, executive produced by Fred Greenhalgh and Molly Barton. And a reminder that today's episode was made possible in part by Magic Mind. You have a limited offer you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with code Undertow20 at checkout. Claim it at magicmind.com/Undertow. That's magicmind.com/Undertow, code Undertow20.
The Warning Woods has haunting horror stories that are sure to linger with you long after listening. I'm Miles Tritle, writer and narrator of The Warning Woods. Each week, I write an original scary story and share it with you on The Warning Woods. I've written 2 novels and nearly 200 short stories spanning the horror genre. If you're into scary stories, you need to check out The Warning Woods. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Warning Woods and click play at your own risk.
If you want a person dead, you call a hitman. If you want a monster dead, you call Lincoln Franks. But you better be able to pay the price he asks, because Lincoln doesn't work for free. Pay to slay, bitches. Slay Season 2 is the current season of Scott Sigler Slices, a fiction podcast with dark tales hacked from the mind of a #1 New York Times bestselling author. Slay is a foul-mouthed, monster-killing, drug-addled anti-hero story that's John Wick meets Buffy meets Breaking Bad. Slay Season 1 is complete and waiting for you in the feed, as is Scott's short story anthology, Blood is Red. Scott Sigler Slices is the world's longest-running fiction podcast, 19 years and counting, with new episodes dropping every Sunday. Get Scott Sigler Slices on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.